Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, going pretty well, Aaron. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well, we've recently wrapped up our SMSF Annual Compliance Masterclass, which takes a look at, I guess, the various aspects that you might be considering through the year-end approach. And we had a number of questions that arose from that masterclass from our members and other attendees from that session. And today we thought we'd just drill down into one of these areas, which is around the topic of condition of release. And Tim, we've seen some changes from 1 July 2024, where the old, preservation age to age 60 disappeared, and therefore we're really focusing on that 60 to 65 age, which part of that criteria for condition of release is around termination of employment. Now, whilst someone is highly unlikely to have never worked, it did flag the question from that session around, well, what documentation is likely needed to be collected to prove that a person had worked at some point in their life, including many years ago, which may have been 15, 20, 30 years or so. So I just wanted to get you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that particular issue in the context of people that are utilising that condition of release ultimately to move themselves into retirement phase.
Yeah, look, I guess where I'd start there, Aaron, is that the concept of retirement is twofold. So there's effectively two approaches to someone meeting that retirement condition. So before, when preservation age was under 60, there's a condition where you cease gainful employment and you declare your intention to never again be gainfully employed. And that still exists. So that exists for somebody that effectively stops working prior to age 60. And then there is now the more, I guess, commonly acceptable approach to retirement for those people who are over 60 or 60 or over, which is that an arrangement of gainful employment comes to an end. And in this instance, future intention is not actually relevant. So basically, it really comes down to, when did you stop working? If you've stopped working from age 60 onwards, then it's really just about your current arrangement.
Yep.
Whereas if you stopped prior to turning 60, then your future intention is critical.
Yeah, so just to sort of expand on that. So in essence, if we've got a situation where someone may have, and it may be, we're looking at probably females here that may have worked up until a point in time where they may have had kids, and then they may never have actually gone back into the workforce. So they will get and never intend on getting back into the workforce. So we're going to have to demonstrate that they've had that employment arrangement at some time in the past. And again, as I said, that they're not going to be, in essence, seeking gainful employment on at least a part-time basis in the future.
Yeah, that's right. And that's really where the question came in the session, was about how do we prove that historical element. I mean, it's easy to make the future declaration about your intention, albeit that it's got to be a genuine declaration of future intent. You can't just say that I'm ceasing work on Friday and I have no intention of going back to work and then starting up again, Monday. Now that's the extreme case, but even very short term, if you make a declaration knowing full well that you're going to enter into some work arrangement again in the near future, then that's an inappropriate declaration to make. But going back to the other point, for those that have worked in the past, what information do you have that can support your position? Now, is a statutory declaration enough? I would suggest probably in most instances that would be, because you remembering that you're appeasing. Firstly, you're appeasing yourself as the trustee of your self-managed super fund, and the other party potentially, but then you're appeasing, if asked, the regulator. So you've got to appease the ATO. Now, if somebody's going to have records of you working, it is likely to be the ATO, but of course they don't keep records indefinitely. So they may have destroyed that information. The fact that you have a tax file number, for example, is often a good sort of indicator that at some point in time you have had income that you've needed to declare, and so you've potentially got references there to that gainful employment. But yeah, anything that you can dig up that's going to be able to prove that is going to work in your favour.
Yeah, so I guess we've been focusing there on the retrospective nature of employment, but I think equally you then said in the current landscape where you're looking at this prospectively, then it becomes a much easier situation. So cessation of employment is clearly, once you reach age 60, is an ability to do that. And that means that if you actually have multiple employers and you cease one of those arrangements, well, that in essence automatically opens up the ability for you to tap into what would become unrestricted non-preserved benefits. And so from that point of view, I wanted to get you to sort of comment on that, but overlaying, of course, the fact that if you've still got one employment arrangement still running, to outline the impact of those contributions and the earnings that would be derived from that as well.
Yeah, so I guess probably to kickstart that part of the conversation, one of the key things is that we've said that the declaration that's required is that a gainful employment arrangement has come to an end after turning 60. So clearly the first thing is that you have to appreciate what gainful employment is. And gainful employment is, effectively work for remuneration, for reward, right? That is more than 10 hours in a week, right? So part-time is defined as between 10 and 30 hours, and then full-time is above 30 hours. So anybody that's working less than 10 hours a week is technically not gainfully employed, right? So once you reduce your hours below that 10, then you can make that declaration. Further to your point, if you've got multiple employer arrangements, then the cessation of one will trigger the capacity for your benefits at that point in time to become unrestricted non-preserved. And that has the benefit of allowing you to, say, move, rather than go into, say, a transition to retirement income stream, which you can commence from preservation age. However, the benefits are fully restricted and you can only draw up to 10%. If you can demonstrate that you have ceased a gainful employment arrangement, then you can start an account-based pension, which will not only give you access to all of your money at that point in time, it will also give the fund access to the exempt current pension income deduction. So there's some quite significant benefits in being able to meet that condition. Now, alternately, if you've got further employment or you've got additional employment and you've got contributions and earnings coming in, then those monies will be contributed to an accumulation interest, and the earnings on those monies will continue to be preserved. So to unpreserve those monies, you would have to make another declaration at a future point in time to access those monies. So if you make your declaration with the intention of just drawing a lump sum, then all you're effectively doing is unpreserving the benefits at a given date, and then all future earnings are preserved. But if you commence an income stream, then all the earnings on that income stream will be unrestricted non-preserved.
Yeah, so I know we use the term crystallized segment in there, but in essence, if we've got an employment arrangement that's ceasing, there's nothing that prevents or precludes us from noting that declaration and then crystallizing at that point in time what was preserved to unrestricted non-preserved benefit. It doesn't require us to have to move that into the retirement phase, but it can allow us to move that money in, where we're of the age to be able to do so and so forth. But importantly, that amount that sits in unrestricted will in essence be locked in, so it's not going to get any further adjustments to it because of the fact that we've still got an employment arrangement that would be running, and therefore the contributions and earnings in that respect will be applied on a preserved basis until such a time that we, in essence, unrestrict all that money, which could come by, as you said, another retirement condition that's met, any sort of incapacity, terminal illness, or of course, once they attain age 65.
Yeah, look, and I'll just sort of highlight one real anomaly with the whole preservation piece, and that is, we take somebody who ceases gainful employment, right? So they've still got other employment activities going on, but they cease gainful employment and they unrestrict their benefits. So they move to unrestricted non-preserved benefits on a given point in time, but they leave that money in accumulation. What we saw in, let's say 2008, for example, was the bottom of the market fall out, and people's portfolios dropped significantly. You know, in some instances, up to 60% of money was lost overnight. Now, the interesting piece there is, if you maintain your employment arrangement and say all your growth continues to be preserved, or your unrestricted non-preserved, if you've had a loss, would be then crystallized at that lowest point, and then all your growth back would come back as a preserved benefit. So that's, you know, the nuance between, say, leaving money in accumulation versus starting a pension. If you start the pension, then all the growth would be unrestricted non-preserved.
Yeah, and that, I know we're sort of going off topic here a bit, but you know, there are, I guess, things within the legislation that when you start to combine unrestricted and preserved monies together, the rules don't necessarily work in favour of that unrestricted money. And I'm referencing obviously TRISs there. So, yeah, if we had that situation whereby a person decided to meet a retirement condition, stop one of their accounts because of that termination of employment, and then started a TRIS with both preserved and unrestricted money, well, then the priority of cashing rules within Reg 6.22 would in essence erode that unrestricted non-preserved money first, which is really why we always say, if you draw that line in the sand at that point in time, always look to separate those things out, because you've got an account-based pension there, which gives you unfettered access to all that money, including earnings being attributed in an unpreserved way, and then set up a TRIS for that preserved money, because you're not going to be needing to draw down on that unrestricted money in there. In essence, all earnings are preserved, all benefit payments are coming out of preserved, and therefore you've restricted your 4 and 10% to the confines of that particular transition to retirement income stream.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, and that's just the mechanics of the legislation is when you draw your money out, you draw it from unrestricted first. When it comes back in, it goes back in as preserved first. So it's a diminishing value of unrestricted non-preserved unless you're locking it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess, Tim, this was just one example of some of the questions that we see as part of these masterclass events. A big thank you once again for your contribution to the masterclass, and of course to this edition of Feeling Smarter.
Always a pleasure, and I look forward to chatting next week.
Will do. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the week. Bye for now.
Bye.